Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Welcome to episode 106 of the MMA Outsiders. I'm Tom Albano. That's Zain Bando. Zain, the weekend that was packed, the weekend that had plenty of anticipation around it in multiple ways is now over. And Zain, all I can say is I hope our episode today is not the you-know-what show that the card on Friday night was.
Yeah, I think we'll do our best to dissect everything the best we can to not make it the you-know-what show that UFC 309 was, but
Oh no, I wasn't talking about UFC 309. I was talking about the other card.
Well, that's fair too. I mean, I think it was a mix of everything this weekend. But yes, the card on Friday night was, in a nutshell, that and plenty of other adjectives that I'd rather not say, but we're going to get into the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight. We'll also get into the madness that was UFC 309 the next night, other side of the country in your neck of the woods in New York City. But before we do that, though, Tom, I'll let you take it away with the honors of all the business that we need to take care of first before we get into that.
Of course, thank you very much. By the way, we did have somebody on the floor at UFC 309 who we'll bring in just a second. But you make sure that like button, subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Make sure to go to social media, X or Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at MMA Outsiders ETB, and at ETB Network to follow along with us across social media. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/ETB Network. Help us continue our climb. We're so close to 900 subscribers. We need to get over this hump and get to 1,000 subscribers. Of course, if you don't want to see Zain and I's ugly mugs, you can go listen to the MMA Outsiders wherever you get your podcasts, on Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your audio-only content. And of course, if you are listening
YouTube
on those
Premium,
platforms,
by the way, too.
yes. And if you are listening on those audio-only platforms that are not YouTube Premium, we thank you, but also encourage you to come to our YouTube home, hit the subscribe button like we said before. And of course, the MMA Outsiders and everything else here at the Empty the Bench Network is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, ripping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. We will have more NBA streams coming up this week. There may be one on Saturday. Go to playback.tv/ETB Network to get the latest up-to-date schedule. Obviously, in a couple of weeks, when UFC 310 is approaching, we will do one more fight study for the year with UFC 310. But right now, we're going to be focused on UFC 309. And in order to help us with UFC 309, to get another perspective on everything that's going on, producer Pat was on the ground at UFC 309 at Madison Square Garden. So we're going to bring him in here to get his take on things.
Hello, everyone.
Hello,
up,
Pat.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. All right. We need to get your insight, from an on-the-floor perspective of everything that has happened. So we're going to go right into, Zain, it looked like you were going to say.
It's something that I wanted to start out with before we even get into the card that was. What was it like as your first experience as being a credentialed member of the media at a UFC event?
It was stressful, anxiety-ridden. Probably the hardest I've ever worked in my life. And I do it all again. I had a 13-hour workday on fight night. We got there at 3:45 to wait in line outside of MSG, and we did not leave the arena until 5:15 a.m. So it was crazy. Got to talk to all the winners except Jon Jones and Jim Miller, but I got to talk to Jon earlier in the week at the press conference. Got to talk to a lot of fighters at media day. It was an amazing experience. It was something that I really needed and something that I'm so happy that I was able to do. It's just crazy still. Like it didn't hit me the entire week. I tried not to let it. But when I got home, it like finally hit me like, wow, like beforehand, like when people ask me like, oh, like who's the most famous fighter you've ever talked to? Like I was like always like, oh, Chael Sonnen, oh, Aljamain Sterling when he was champion, oh, maybe Marab, like now it's Jon Jones. And then now I've like talked to Dana White too. Like Dana White isn't just someone that like UFC fans know now either. It's just someone that like everyone knows.
Yeah.
It's a pretty surreal thing to actually like realize that I talked.
Well, here's my question. Since you brought up Dana, how did it feel to get shut down by Dana in the way that you did?
It was amazing. It was amazing. For anyone that didn't see, I asked Dana about UFC London, tell me about some of the fighters, and he just said no. So, but he gave me a little bit smile after.
I was gonna say it was with a smile on his face.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a mean no.
It wasn't a malicious no. I saw him give a lot.
It looked like a. I want to tell you more, but I can't.
I saw him give a lot worse answers to other media members throughout the week, so I was very happy with the two answers I had received from Dana and with the questions I asked him throughout the week.
That's why I hold the one question that I asked him years ago dear, because he actually answered it.
It's hard actually to get him to answer a question.
I know, but you did get plenty of answers from Jon Jones, and I thought the question that you asked was tremendous given the high stakes nature of the fight that he was going into with Stipe Miocic.
Yeah, no, I mean with Jones, it's like a lot of people were focused on the Aspinall thing, and of course, like of course I wanted to get an bite about him saying something about Aspinall. Of course, everyone did, but that's why I went with a different thought process. I kind of looked at some older Jon Jones things, right? Some older Jon Jones press conferences and stuff. And in one of them, he did bring up that Anderson Silva was his favorite fighter growing up and his GOAT growing up. And I didn't even ask the question exactly how I wanted it to. I shortened it up a bit because it was at the press conference. But basically, I got what I wanted out of it from him. Like, he understood where I was going with it. So it was good that he kind of got where I was going, even though I wasn't able to fully express what I meant. And it's just really cool. Like, I can only imagine how it meant for him to like, coming up, look at guys like Anderson Silva and be like, damn, that's the greatest fighter of all time. And then now like look down and be like, damn, all these guys think I'm the greatest of all time. Like it's it must be a pretty surreal feeling,
Oh yeah. No, without a doubt.
It was cool.
And well, just to get into things, I mean, Jon Jones did prove on Saturday night, to Dana White's credit, that maybe not so much on a pound for pound current, but in terms of greatest of all time, yeah, the way that he performed on Saturday night, the way that he finished Stipe Miocic to retain the UFC heavyweight championship, sending Miocic into retirement. I mean, it was a phenomenal performance.
Pat, as someone who was on the ground for it, and as someone who was in the building for it, just what was the what were you feeling as the Raw fight was going on? Because obviously, you've been to UFC events before. I've been in the UFC events before. It's a totally different experience watching a fight without all of the guardrails, if you will, when it comes to commentary and consistent replays and stuff. So I guess
especially especially at a an event like an arena like Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, so what was it like physically being in the arena as this fight was going on?
I mean, first off, I don't know what exactly Stipe's skull is made of. I think those elbows should have cracked his skull in the first round. I don't know how he got past that point of the fight. I'm very happy that Stipe put paws on him though in the second round. Stipe like hit him back a bit and like put up some fight. I needed Stipe to prove to everyone that he wasn't something washed like crazy, Like I really did think everyone was sleeping on Stipe a little too much, and I think just that second round kind of proved that he could still hang a little bit, Obviously he's past his prime though. But overall, like it was really crazy to see Jon Jones fight in person. He really is a crazy talent. Like that trip in the first round that he got Stipe down with was just so quick. Like it's a lot of his strikes are just, you could tell it's thrown with just a lot of IQ and just such good technique. He just throws with such good technique, really. Like it is crazy. And like it was cool to see, especially when he rocks Stipe. When he like, you don't get to see Jon Jones rock someone on the feet with his hands a lot, you know. So getting to see him use his boxing when he rocks Stipe on the feet, like seeing him land those punches and like really sit down in the pocket, like that was really fun. You know, you don't get to see that from Jon Jones a lot.
And we were talking before we started recording about just the way you saw Jones's striking up close and personal. You mentioned all the power that he was bringing. And I made mention of something that my dad said when he was sitting there next. Jon Jones, was always known for those leg kicks, those oblique kicks that he would throw. He hasn't thrown that as a heavyweight yet in the 2 fights he's had now.
No,
Imagine if he starts to implement those again. We talk about all the weight that we had for Jon Jones to move up to heavyweights. And the way that he looks, we saw him delivering some powerful, some rocking shots at the light heavyweight. With a heavyweight, it seems like it's another level.
No, he definitely packs a punch at heavyweight, which is what I wanted to see. We didn't get to see anything of that against Gon.
Gon,
We
yeah.
got to see any of that against him. So we kind of saw that Jones can strike as a heavyweight on the feet, but we also saw he can have some uncomfortable moments. His defense was lacking a little bit, and he was getting caught by Stipe. He didn't really look to be hurt, but you could tell he didn't want to be hit anymore. He was running away. There were times he was literally running away. What I will say though, when that spinning body kick landed, I knew it destroyed Stipe's ribcage on impact. I knew as soon as it landed inside the arena that Stipe broke multiple ribs. For sure.
And the thing is, I'll tell from my experience, I was talking to somebody, I won't name names, but they were like, after Stipe lost, okay, fight a real challenger. But I maybe attribute that to a little bit of British bias on their part. But you have to give credit where credit is due, because that finish, that spinning wheel back kick to the body, which, as you said, shattered Stipe's ribs. It's like, good God, you don't see fighters, you don't see every fighter deliver that, especially at heavyweight. Yeah, deliver the way, deliver that kind of shot. And
it's not even about the kick either. Like I was saying before, that technique
it's the
where
accuracy.
he landed that kick, and then he told us post fight, because someone brought it up. I don't know if you guys saw this clip. He had said he had been training that kick with a Taekwondo master for the past year, 3 hours every week.
And that just,
and it showed.
For all the crap that we give, because said it again, pound for pound and GOAT ranking should be considered separate. I don't know why Dana combines it, but it's training like this, and it's putting into the focus and the technique like this that puts Jones as one of, if not the greatest fighter that we have ever seen, at least in our generation of MMA. It is unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it was great to watch Jones in person. It only solidified what I already thought, that he was the greatest fighter of all time. I already thought that, so it didn't really change too much for me. The one thing I will say it changed, and I know I brought this up to you guys before, it did make me a little bit more confident that I would pick Aspinall against him, though, because as good as he looked, he does look slow at heavyweight. He really does, and I am still worried about his cardio a little bit.
All right, let's pause on the Aspinall talk, because we're going to get to that in a second in its own set. Let's talk about Stipe for a second, because I think we would be remiss if we did not reflect on Stipe's career. You're right. Stipe did not look washed in this fight. At the same time, considering he had been out of action for 2.5 years and got finished the way he did, I think this is the perfect time to call it a career, say that he's done.
I think so too.
And you know what? For all that we talk about Jones being the greatest of all time, I still think he has a couple of ways to go before we call him the greatest heavyweight that the UFC has seen, because I think that is still Stipe Miocic. He's the only guy in UFC history to have defended the heavyweight title on three occasions, consecutively. No one had done that. I think there are a couple of people who could give Stipe a little run. You could say Randy Couture for the 3 reigns he had. You could say Brock Lesnar from a business
I
standpoint.
think Randy and Stipe are very similar in that regard.
Absolutely.
I think they're extremely similar.
Absolutely. And the fact that Stipe defended the title multiple times, I think
And
it's actually
won it
4.
back. And won
And
it
Won
back.
it back and retained it again before
Mhm.
losing to Francis.
Mhm.
I think so. It's like one of those two, like you said, Zan. Like they are very similar in that regard. I wouldn't necessarily put Brock there, but I think the only reason Brock would be in that conversation is money wise. He did the UFC a lot of business back in the day as a pay-per-view.
I still think he's the most. I mean, no disrespect to Jones, he's obviously the heavyweight champion now, but I think it would be hard pressed to say anyone other than Brock Lesnar is arguably the most famous heavyweight from a business standpoint that they ever had. I don't think it's remotely close. A WWE crossover star like that, we've never seen that.
There's been so few people that you consider big money draws within the sport. Obviously, Conor is number one, but
Right.
I think Ronda, given her star power a decade ago, she was up there as well. I think Brock Lesnar, like you said, Dan, considering the WWE crossover and his NCAA background. Remember, he was an NCAA champion
Yeah,
before heading
University of
over.
Minnesota. Yep.
He's up there. And honestly, you know who else I think is up there? Jon Jones, given
Yeah,
the reign of success that he had for over a decade at light heavyweight.
I
All
think
the
so too.
Yeah, I think he's right up there too. I think that's the thing. When you consider everything, it goes back to what I've been saying for these weeks. You know, if you're considering out of the cage stuff character as part of GOAT, you'll never consider Jon Jones the GOAT at that point. You'll forever be a GSP person. But it's just, and the way that he performed against Stipe, you know, Stipe will be the heavyweight GOAT right now. But if Jones, you know, gets these next couple of fights against an Aspinall or Pereira, he has the chance to take Stipe's spot, to be right up there with Stipe and Randy at heavyweight. Especially given how late in his career Jones is doing this.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. We'll definitely have to see. I mean, if he even
Well, to
fights
be
again.
fair, Randy was also 38 when he started his
That's
first
true too.
heavyweight title run in 2001. So
That's true too. And then the way that he upset Sylvia. But again, actually, Zan, that furthers your argument, the similarities between Jones and Couture.
that's correct.
All right. Now let's talk about because I think this is the interesting part of the conversation.
Oh, I think
Where the hell do we go from here?
I think this got bigger buzz online from what I saw than the actual fight itself. This was what everybody wanted to know
Oh,
about.
pre-fight, 100%. There's no question. No question. Post-fight, it was mixed a little bit with Jones's finish and everything, and but yes, you're 100% right, because even after the fight, this was probably the biggest headline. And before the fight, it was the headline. The fight, like, it was no one was talking about Jones Stipe before the fight. It was Jones Aspinall.
Yeah.
So I guess before we dive deeper into this, I guess I'm just going to pose a question to you guys because Dana White made a really bold claim. Obviously, Pat, you were in the room when he said it. Dana White thinks that if Jones versus Aspinall is made, that it is a chance to be the biggest fight in UFC history. Is that fair? Is that fair to say or foul to say? I think it's one of them, but it's not. It's not the biggest. I don't know about the biggest. I don't think you can have the biggest fight in UFC history without Conor McGregor on one side of the bill. So
that's the thing. We've seen Conor Khabib, we see Conor Nate from from exclusively at least a pay-per-view draw, pay-per-view buys perspective. Obviously, having Conor McGregor in there is guaranteed a million plus. I don't know if Jones versus Pereira. I think it would come close. I mean, I remember
I'm asking about Jones versus Aspinall, not
I know.
Pereira.
No, but I'm saying from a wider perspective.
Right, okay.
Because I think Stipe DC2 got close. I think it was like 600,000 or 700,000 or something like that. That I feel like Jones is, like I said, a pay-per-view draw. I think it really depends because, I mean, Zan, I'll use your own words last week. You said for a Jones-Pereira fight to happen, Pereira has to still be the light heavyweight champion by the time they face off.
I think so. By the way, you were asking about the
pay-per-view numbers, yeah.
The pay-per-view numbers for Stipe and DC at UFC 252 was 500,000.
No, 241.
Okay.
Okay, but that means something. 252 still. The trilogy fight during a COVID time, getting $500,000. I think that's good.
The rumored number, according to Reddit and a few other smaller sources, was 750,000, but it's not like
So think about that. Stipe Miocic, and to also go back to his legacy. I mean, he got $750,000. I mean, 750,000 pay-per-view buys for a rematch with DC. I think Jones versus Pereira should be able to eclipse $1 million if it's the super fight.
And by the way, the first fight between these two, just because we're on this rivalry now, was 380,000 buys.
Wow.
So
that's amazing. But I guess it goes to the point that I made last week, Zan. I mean, we both kind of agreed on last week. It's only fair for Aspinall to get the next title shot on a fairness perspective, but Pereira is the bigger fight.
Pereira's the bigger fight for sure, because there's the whole aura. It's the greatest MMA fighter of all time versus, in my opinion, the most dangerous light heavyweight champion outside of Jon Jones' run.
Correct, but
you'd have to go all the way. You'd have to go all the way back to Chuck Liddell to find the light heavyweight champion as scary as what Pereira is.
And you say bigger fight, you're just referring to like pay-per-view buys, like numbers wise and stuff.
Or are you saying like intrigue? That's a good question, Pat.
Because I think the thing is, you have to consider, again, Pereira hasn't been in the UFC that long, but as you kind of mentioned, Zan, the aura that he's developed as a middleweight champion, as a light heavyweight champion, how quickly, like we mentioned Brock Lesnar before, he has had a Brock Lesnar style rise, quick he's gone.
Yes, for sure.
It's weird.
And I think I'm not one of them, but I've seen dozens and dozens of people on the internet that are convinced, and I'm sure you guys have seen some of the same people. They are convinced that Pereira is the guy to finally finish Jones and end his legendary run. Tons of people believe it if that were to happen. Which, by the way, if that does happen, and if in a hypothetical crazy scenario Pereira fights Jones and Pereira beats him, Pereira's on a stratosphere that no one will ever reach. That is like
I could only imagine.
That is like some Giants beating the 17-0 Patriots. That's
better days. Better days, but that's the size of the point. All right. The reason why, for anyone who has missed it or anyone on the audio end that can't see our banners here. All right, let me lay it out. So, Jon Jones wants Pereira. Jon Jones, it seems like, for the comments that he's made over the last week, in the lead up to the fight and after the fight, he does not like Tom Aspinall. Something has gone wrong. Aspinall's comments have rubbed him the wrong way. He does not want to do anything with Aspinall unless he gets, in his words, F you money. Dana would rather Jon Jones face Tom Aspinall because Dana is using the same argument that he said no with McGregor versus Masvidal, in that, Jones is too big. He's a natural heavyweight. Pereira was a middleweight and a light heavyweight. I don't know. He would look small as a heavyweight. Jones would probably be too dangerous for him. So at this point, for all the good that I've seen and for all the glazing, as the kids say, of Jon Jones, we are now back to square one. It's like the cyclical nature of the Jones-Dana relationship. All right, we've gone past winning phase. Now we're getting to the point where they're going to be disagreeing again.
Right. Simply put, and I'm going to say this until the cows come home, based on, I guess, I don't know if you want to call it morals or formalities or whatever you want to call it. The only fight that makes the most sense right now next is this unification fight. My argument is why even make an interim heavyweight title if you're not going to give the interim heavyweight champion what he so rightfully earned, even defended the interim heavyweight title.
By the way,
so you made him defend it, and now he's not, and now he's not going to fight the champ.
Really? And by the way, if this is the case, if you were so desperate,
it's unbelievable to me.
if you were
It's
so
unfathomable to
desperate,
me.
if you were so desperate, to get another title on the line for 295, but you were so desperate to get this Jones Stipe fight in that you were willing to wait one whole year, then what was the point of having Tom Aspinall and Sergey Pavlovich fight for an interim title last year's Madison Square Garden card?
It made no sense.
You still had Pereira and Yuri
if
on that
they
card.
don't, right. This is assuming that they don't make Jones Aspinall next. Then there wasn't a point. If they do,
Right.
then of course there was a point.
Right, but Zan, look what's going on with 310, which we'll get to in a second. Shavkat's replacement fight. That's a 5-round non-title fight. You're telling me they couldn't have done then Tom versus Sergey 5-round title eliminator, and then just had Alex versus Yuri 1 for a vacant title, and that still could have been a fine card. It didn't need.
Okay, well,
the interim.
actually, I would somewhat disagree because there were two separate scenarios. They knew how long Jones was going to be out with this torn pec. Usually, if you're out a year, you have to institute some sort of interim heavyweight title to keep the division moving.
No, you know what you do, and I was fighting against this because Zan, you know how I defended the Jones Stipe fight. You strip a guy. Jamal Hill was willing to vacate the title. Yuri vacated the title. For a year, you gotta probably strip.
I don't know. I feel like every single situation is different. I still think that Yuri Magomed situation, the way that was handled, was very interesting.
Well, the bottom line is right now we can't worry about a Pereira super fight because if we're talking about challengers who deserve, title shot, Magomed Ankalaev has to get a title shot next.
Right.
We can't worry about a Jones Pereira super fight until Pereira Ankalaev.
Which I think is only fair because if you guys know it well too, Pereira is still cleaning 205 pounds out. That's his next challenger. In my humble opinion, there's no point in him fighting Jones at this present moment when Magomed is still
and no
there.
disrespect to Aspinall, but Magomed Ankalaev has been waiting on a title shot for longer than Aspinall because it goes back to 282. Some people say that Ankalaev should have, maybe it would have ended by Pereira's hands already, but should have been a light heavyweight champion after, the fight against Jan. That he would have won.
That's how I scored it.
Yeah, that's how I scored it.
Can I just say how funny it is that the two guys in the UFC right now that deserve title shots the most that haven't gotten them yet are Tom Aspinall and Magomed Ankalaev. If you go up and down every single weight class, you have to end up on those. You could say Hamza, you could say a couple other names, but realistically, Ankalaev's win streak and Aspinall's hype plus being the interim champion, those are the two most deserving fighters in the UFC currently of title shots.
1,000%.
And the two champions of their weight classes are talking about fighting each other instead of them.
And Sam, by your logic, because people fear that Ankalaev could give Pereira a challenge. I mean, Roundtree gave him a challenge when nobody expected. And if Ankalaev wins this fight, then by your logic, Jones Pereira's up in smoke.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So at this point, no, but what I'm saying is I agree with you. I think you got to give Aspinall his due. Here's what you do. If I'm Dana, Jones, you fight Aspinall. You win. Pereira, you fight Ankalaev. You both win. You get the super fight.
That seems more logistical to me.
That's what it seems.
Right.
But given how tumultuous Jones and Dana's relationship is and how Jones hates Aspinall, what I could see happening is Jones retire. I still think there's a chance Jones retires and says, I'm just going to win.
Which would just be so devastating.
It would be, but at the same time, I mean, Dan, it goes back to what we talked about. How long Stipe waited on the sideline, how long Juliana waited on the sideline, how long Strickland is waiting on the side. Jones could pull the same thing at this point until he gets what he wants.
Yeah, and then at that point, the interim title is just kind of there.
So one of two things happens if Jones still retires. One, Dana gives in to give Jones his way, so that way Jones can retire on his terms. Or two, depending how bad the relationship gets, maybe as an FU, if Pereira beats an Ankalaev, he books Pereira versus Aspinall for a vacant heavyweight title.
I could see the last scenario happening, but that's a last
I think so. Again, it is a last resort, but it would be typical TKO Dana FU to somebody.
Well, I don't think it would make a lot of ESPN executives happy because I think that Jon Jones is a major draw for the four letters. So
Agree, but
I think if he's not a part of it in some way, I think
Zen,
I think half of that equation loses.
Zan, are you insinuating Alex Pereira is not after all he did this year?
I mean, I think he is from a hardcore standpoint, but I think from a casual standpoint, they're not willing to admit what he's. I think if you're not a true like connoisseur of what's going on in the sport, I don't think people would truly realize what Pereira has been able to do to save some of these cards. So I don't know.
All right,
and what's even worse is Pereira isn't even necessarily a loser in this whole situation. If he really wanted to, Pereira's got arguably the easiest job in the world right now. What he could do if he was a smart guy, he could probably go rent a yacht somewhere in some exotic country, sit out for a year and call the shots and be like, yeah, I'm gonna fight Magomed Ankalaev whenever the heck I want. We're gonna watch and see what happens with the heavyweight division. And I'm gonna come back when I want to come back and control my own destiny on my own terms. Because he's earned it. He's fought what? He's fought what? Three times this year? You know, we don't see him the first 7 months.
We were thinking there was a chance he was going to save 310 too.
I know.
All right, we've gone on very long. Let's get to the co-main event because we still have a crap show from Friday night to talk about. Charles Oliveira. It was a one-sided win, but that fifth round was it was very scary. You thought that Nate Diaz had a scary fifth round against Leon Edwards. Oh, I don't think that compares to what happened here.
This doesn't compare at all. Are you kidding me? This was something straight. I don't even know what this was. But I gotta say, the officiating in round 3 was atrocious. The amount of shots that were thrown to the back of Oliveira's head were unbelievable. I mean, I'm not sure what angle you saw for the Pat, but I feel like the officiating late in this fight could have been a lot better.
Yeah, I didn't really get to see that as much. I wasn't able to tell really that those shots were to the back of the head until I saw everyone complaining about them on social media and saw them online. But that fifth round was wild. I mean, I don't know. Like, as long as Charles is okay, like, you know, as long as there's a couple back of the head shots didn't affect him, and he still won the fight and everything, you know, like I that was worth it, I guess. You know, like that fifth round was absolutely.
I mean, it was absolutely Pat. I was scared. Like I saw him landing. I said this is gonna get stopped. This is gonna get stopped.
Kind of like the first round of the first fight.
Right.
There's a lot of moments in that fight that were very reminiscent of the first fight.
I said second verse, same as the first, but I thought it was going to be because Oliveira would win by second round finish again. But there were still some callbacks. And I mean, would it have not been nuts if one of those slams knocked out Oliveira?
Dude. I never even considered that.
If that happened, that would have given Holloway's last second knockout of Gaethje a run for its money as moment of
for
the
sure.
year.
Especially if it was the second one.
Mm-hmm.
After him like standing up looking at the crowd. Yeah, no, if he knocked Oliveira out with the second slam, that would have been nuts.
So what this does to me, you know, I did say this was an all or nothing fight. At this point, I don't know what's left for chance. I know he called out Conor, but when Dana's saying that Conor's not coming back, not in 2025, in late 2025, that does nothing to help my thoughts on, I think, if Conor is ever coming back. Now, that said, Zan, if you remember, I did say that Max Holloway should be in he should be in consideration for Max Holloway's lightweight debut opponent. Well, I say lightweight debut opponent. I mean, on a permanent basis. Obviously, Holloway has fought at lightweight twice before, but I think that Chandler Holloway fight is really even more interesting now.
I mean, yeah, it would obviously be a big fight for a lot of reasons. I mean, obviously, of course, you know, that would obviously be contested for the BMF title. There are very few guys that fit that description, but those two guys do, and there's no way that wouldn't be one of the best fights of the year if it were to take place in 2025. And that's one of those, you know, fan-friendly fights where someone like me, who's fought both of their careers, for a decade plus. You want to see neither of those guys lose, and that's one of those fights where if one of those guys loses, I think that's a great way to go out on your shield and retire. Oh, I mean, if that were to happen, I wouldn't be opposed to it. Obviously, Chandler, is still trying to push for his dream money fight, which at this point I think has a 2% chance of happening. And I think the reason why Dana, I have a theory about this, and it's going to go back to the same theory I've had for about 10 months now. The reason why he keeps saying mid to late 2025 is I think there's still undisclosed negotiation issues that's causing this to be delayed. And I think it's more so on the part of the UFC having no idea what's going on with McGregor personally that's causing this to still be pushed back.
Do you think it's also because they want him locked up under UFC? They never want him to leave basically the UFC.
That's probably why too. Yeah.
Do you think, I'll just throw this out here because I don't have the sound ready, but conspiracy. Do you think him being a part owner of BKFC has rubbed them the wrong way, and as part of it, they would try to get him to sell off his stake?
I don't know that, but I wouldn't doubt it if that's where their head's at, considering that if you're with the UFC, you have to be 100% all in. So, but I feel like on that same breath, though, with me saying that, I feel like at some point they're going to be like, "F it, we just can't, we can't do anything about what he does outside of our walls."
Yeah.
So,
I mean, right now he has a trial in Ireland that he's got to deal with first.
well, by the way, Pat, did you notice that not a single person asked a question regarding the trial when you were there?
Yeah.
Did you notice that?
Yeah.
I feel like that's a letdown by the media. I'm sorry.
I was going to be the one to do it in my first event.
I know, but somebody like a Kevin Ioli, a John Morgan, like
none of those guys were there.
And that's a shame. I mean, this is Madison Square Garden, one of the most high-stakes heavyweight fights, and some of the big names aren't there. I'm sorry, that's not a good look.
John Morgan was busy with CFFC Match Day. He's commentating.
Still, I don't think that's a good look. You got, for a card at Madison's, maybe this sounds hypocritical for me as a smaller medium, but as somebody, who, you got to be there. Obviously, MMA coverage doesn't dictate my whole life. I have other obligations. But for somebody who it does, I feel like you got to be there for a fight. I get not everybody was a fan of Jones versus Stipe. I get it. But at the same time, you got to look like, I don't agree with Sean Cian on a lot. But at the same time, even he recognized that there was an aura about Jones versus Miocic. Zain, you mentioned that last week, that there was an aura.
Oh, yeah. It even felt that way coming through my TV screen that the fight felt big. Even the pay-per-view intro, which was one of the sickest pay-per-view intros.
For whom the bell tolls, that was amazing.
Oh, I got goosebumps, man. Are you kidding me?
I mean, I don't know. That really sounds. All right. Overall, let's give it a score. I believe it wasn't a great. It wasn't the poll that we do. I don't believe great won. I think it was either fair, meh, or good that won. I'm going to double check.
Oh, speaking of UFC,
actually, it was a 50-50 vote. Some said great and some said fair, meh.
I thought it was good. So I'd say good.
I would say B. I thought Jones Miocic was good. I thought Oliveira Chandler's ending was insane, but
before the main and co-main event, like before it's happened, my early grade was a C, and my grade was elevated to a B after the co-main and main event.
This is one of those. Remember how I always say, Zain, that sometimes your main event can let you down. This is one of those cases where the main and co-main brought things up because the rest of the card was a disappointment. And Bo Nickel, oh man, if there was an LVP, I mean, I disagreed with commentary. That was not the way to handle it, by doubling down when the crowd is booing you.
I don't agree with at either, but I will say this: I did think Craig managed to win 1 out of those 3 rounds, though.
I agree.
I thought he won.
You
round
want to
1.
take? You want to take from me? Book Bo Nickel. If they're gonna book Bo Nickel against any of the top 15 in his division, they're gonna slaughter him.
I could see it.
They're gonna slaughter him.
I don't know. It's a weird fight. Like I think Bo wanted to prove something to himself.
I
There's
think
there's a reason he didn't wrestle. You know, like I think he really did want to prove something to himself, at least on the feet, and he needed to do that against a guy like Paul Craig. You know, and
I understand, but
he would like a guy like I don't know, like
I understand, but at the same
RoboCop.
time, as Zan's pointing out, Craig came this close to winning the fight.
No, yeah, I thought it was close. I thought it was pretty close too. And he was saying he dominated, which I didn't love. He didn't dominate the fight at all. But at the same time,
I mean that's Bo Nickel being typical Bo Nickel hyping
Yeah.
himself up, though.
yeah, but
we don't.
And Dana even admitted that he didn't think the fight was that good either.
Yeah, I'm
it
gonna.
wasn't.
We don't need another Sean O'Malley. I'm sorry. We don't need somebody whose head is in the clouds, delusional.
I don't know. I just think
that's a little bit of a far take, though, considering that he did win the UFC Bantamweight title.
No, but my point being how O'Malley's like, oh, he refuses to.
I don't think Nickel's that bad. I don't think Nickel's that bad.
I don't think so either. But the way he came off in his interview rubbed the wrong way on me.
I'll say behind the stage post fight, it didn't opposite.
Okay.
He was really like almost humble post fight.
I hope so.
He was saying that he dominated, but he was humble in every other way.
I hope this is just. We'll mention Colby later.
No, he was talking about how people need to get to know him better by watching his podcast and seeing all the social media he puts out there, so they don't just see what's inside the cage and they can get to know him better as a person. He was saying a lot of relatable stuff. If you didn't see the post fight, I'd recommend watching it because it actually made me like Bo Nickel as a person a lot more.
Fair enough. All right, Pat. We have a lot more that we got to get to still, and we're so many minutes in. Thank you for your expertise.
Get it done, boys.
Thank you, Pat.
Well, I think I cut him off a little too early, but nevertheless. All right. Zan, now unfortunately we have to talk about another fight.
Okay.
One that I didn't even get to watch all of because my Netflix managed to go down 3, 4, 5 times during this fight.
It's pretty wild. Before we get into the I just wanted to give a quick shout out to my outlet, MMA Knockout and Sports Illustrated. We had Christy Santiago on the ground for this one, and he brought us some killer content from Ringside actually into Texas. So shout out to us for having a absolutely killer weekend on the content front, starting with Paul-Tyson on Friday. But let me just get into my quick thoughts on this first. I mean, Tom, it's as simple as this. It was a 58-year-old against a 27-year-old, and people were expecting a human car crash. That didn't happen. It was a slow, methodical fight.
Did I not say
Mike Tyson only landing 18 punches the entire fight goes to show you that he shouldn't have been in there. Him having a knee brace goes to show you even further that he shouldn't have been in there. And you want to know what else this fight proved to me? This fight also proved to me that Jake Paul is the worst 11-1 boxer I've ever seen. You're fighting in your 60-year-old man in a sanctioned fight in a city that's known for boxing circuses like this, and you can't knock him out over the course of 16 minutes. You can't knock him out, really?
Zan,
I don't understand that.
You didn't watch the post fight, did you?
I did.
Okay, Jake Paul basically flat out admitted that he carried Mike Tyson the whole way.
No, I know that. It's just
so guess what?
Found to me as a viewer that you put in all this energy. You put out this countdown series. The fight gets to wait for what 3 to 4 to 5 months, and that's what you get. Really?
I mean,
I'm sorry. And that was a total flop on all fronts. Total flop.
Zan, did I not warn last week that I had a feeling that this was going to be a sham?
It was.
And people looked at me, but people looked at me at my personal life. People looked at me at work crazy when I said conspiracy sham, that this was probably going to be rigged. And now I'm just laughing here. And meanwhile, everybody else is just like,
we have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived.
and that's just typical. That's typical Jake Paul.
It's true. It's true.
This was terrible. I'm sorry. I nearly wanted to fall. And the fight didn't even start until midnight Eastern time. I mean, this was atrocious on all ends. I'm
By the way,
sorry.
I thought something, speaking of before the fight, I thought something was wrong with my stream because for whatever reason, you want to know what it did after Serrano Taylor? You're not gonna believe it. Without like doing the skipping motion, it transitioned to the first fight of the.
Wait a minute. Yours did too? There were a couple of points where it went all the way back. Oh my. All right. So this fight was just terrible. But like you said, the fact that Mike Tyson, by the way, says, "Oh, I won't rule out another fight, exhibition." No, I don't want to see any more Mike Tyson fights, exhibition or not.
No way, absolutely not.
I'm done with that. And for Jake Paul, I mean, we'll talk about actually the call outs in a second. I think we have to get to this. This was the story of the card.
For sure. And before we get into this, I just want to say that the Texans Department of Licensing and Regulation should be absolutely ashamed that they let this happen.
I know. Well, they should be also
This is the same commission that it did not hold themselves accountable when Johnny Hendricks fought Robbie Lawler during their during their 2-fight series, and that decision was a screw up too.
Oh, I was going to say, they should be ashamed themselves for allowing Mike Tyson to fight an actual professional fight. Granted, they had some rule changes. They should be ashamed of themselves for the decision of Taylor Serrano too. They should be ashamed that Barrios Ramos was a draw. I'm sorry. There was just so many problems. And then on top of that, obviously the Texas Commission isn't in charge of Netflix, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are people affiliated with the Texas Commission that are affiliated with Netflix, because holy crap on a cracker. Netflix just completely crapped the bed on this one.
And by the way, not just crap the bed, but I'm not sure about you. When I first turned on the stream, my quality was choppy, and then I thought, wait a minute, is it my internet? So I kept force quitting the app, thinking it was my TV, when in fact it was the actual stream where the quality was just horrible.
Well, you want to know what happened with me? So we tested it like a couple of hours. Like we put on a movie just to make sure everything was working. Everything was working fine. And then we go to turn on the card, and we get, one of those things about, oh, you have to upgrade the household account. Like, what? You didn't have to do that for 2 hours before when we were testing. And all of a sudden, it was so infuriating. Like, I mean, come on. And let's talk about the interaction that we had.
Did you get the loopy, did you get the loopy error message that your connection was unable to be restored?
So let's talk about that, because we actually had a public, like I actually agreed with you, but it looked like it was going to be a disagreement at first.
I didn't realize. You can explain it, but I didn't realize
you didn't realize I was doing a thread. Basically.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So here's my point. If anyone missed that on Twitter,
it started with me.
Yeah, it started with you, you basically let your opinion on that. You know what? Mention what your opinion on Netflix with this.
Sure. So I start to see on Twitter there's a trend that people have been having streaming issues, and you know how I am during fights. I don't usually put out my public opinion until afterward. So I just casually tweeted, and I was just like, "Hey, is your Netflix stream awful?" Is the extent to what I tweet, and my tweet started blowing up to the point where it had like 5,000 views in 30 minutes, and it had like a bunch of people retweeting it and people, sending me screenshots and DMing me screenshots. Tom, you knew that this fight was a big deal when my 10 to 15 non-fight fan friends were texting me, A, why their stream wasn't working, and B, when the Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight was supposed to start, because obviously since or not fight people, they don't understand that there's a whole undercard attached. They're like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, Dan, it's
Well,
7
I
o'clock.
had people today telling me that the two fights prior to, the Barrios Ramos fight and the Taylor Serrano fight were more entertaining for them than the actual main event was.
No, it's true. It's
And
true.
and I had some people like, the fact that Serrano had that cut and she continued on from all the headbutts. Somebody told me that they were uncomfortable watching, but they were like, I'm like, welcome to boxing.
Yeah, welcome to combat sports, period. That's like a weekly occurrence.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
so let's explain. Let's go deeper though a little bit more. Let's explain what your kind of thread.
okay, yeah. So
entailed.
your point was basically you were crapping on them and saying, it was just unacceptable how they were tonight, how they were that night. And I said, well, you should have to at least give them a little leeway that this is their first venture, big test into, a sports entertainment platform. Obviously, they have a bunch of sports and entertainment coming up, so it's not going to be perfect. That being said, one part that I will give you credit for is that they had months to prepare because the fight got delayed
Yeah,
from July to
that was
November.
I could have made it a little bit more specifically clear, but that was my point. From
Well,
the postponement to the middle of November, that's plenty of time. In my
well, I had a different take. We had the same take, but for different reason.
right,
Because I said the reason they lose a little bit of slack is not because of what you mentioned. It's because of the fact of how much money they have like they have a deal with the NFL coming up that they're going to stream the 2 Christmas games and they're going to stream a couple of games in 25 and 26. And I think they're being paid like $75 million or something a game.
somewhere around there.
So you have that. And you just signed a 10-year, $5 billion deal with the WWE,
Which is
to-
your wheelhouse. So
to have their flagship Monday Night Raw show streamed live weekly Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. Plus, internationally, you've got basically the WWE Network, what we have in the US on Peacock. All of that content is going on Netflix internationally, including all the pay-per-views. And I would not be surprised, Dan, if after the Peacock deal expires in 26, the same thing happens in the US, that all that content goes over to Netflix.
Oh, I could see it.
So you have so much money and time and resources invested. You are stepped in so deep, to borrow a term from me being an English teacher, stepped in so deep in blood that there's no turning back. You have all of this investment. A night like this cannot happen. And the WWE apparently, Zain, according to a couple of sources, actually called Netflix because they were a little concerned. Because if you think the outrage and the backlash that Netflix got for this, they're not going to be able to deal with a rowdy NFL fan base at Christmas time.
No.
Imagine the first 3-hour Raw on Netflix in January 6, 2025. If the issues happen then, when WWE supposedly is going all out, bringing in John Cena and all the stars and legend, you are going to have hellfire on your hands if that happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, and then when you hear Dana White say after the fact, or no, he actually said it before the UFC 3, and I'm pretty sure that he would love to stay with ESPN if he had it his way. And he even admitted after the fight that the Netflix issues were so bad. He kind of said
Right,
it was
you just lost ground in the negotiations for UFC.
Right, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
It is not a good look right now.
And especially, Tom, and I know it's something we haven't talked about, this was one of those cards where there was no pay-per-view attached. There was no, you have to pay $9.99.
And we praise that because streaming was supposed to be the death of pay-per-view, but everybody else, ESPN, DAZN, has invested in pay-per-view. This was a praised move by Netflix, and it all went to shit anyway. Pardon my French.
And and the one thing I thought was even more hilarious, without getting banned from YouTube, I'll try to tread lightly. I think it's hilarious that some unnamed streaming sites had no issues with the fight, but the winner was streaming service
You're
did.
not wrong. You're
And
not wrong.
also, what's even funnier too, I don't know if you saw this. Antonio Brown was at the fight in Arlington. He streamed the Jumbotron monitor. Guess how many people watched his Instagram?
Millions.
6 million people watched it.
And it was still better quality than the Netflix. My point being, this is unacceptable. And honestly, Zan, if the 2 NFL games on Christmas go as crappy as this, I could honestly see the NFL saying, give us our money back. You're not getting games in 25 and 26.
Oh, I could see it. It's the NFL. They're a multi-billion-dollar.
I wouldn't have been surprised, Zan. I wouldn't have been surprised if they got a call and said, okay, for what happened with Tyson Paul, you're losing. Isn't it like Chiefs Steelers on Christmas?
Yeah, I'm pretty.
We're gonna put that just out of example. We're gonna put that on NFL Network now or on cables. On network television, so that way we don't have the issues.
Right, and which, by the way, I would prefer anyway, because around Christmas time, I'm so used to going to NFL Network anyway that it wouldn't change anything. So
fair enough.
one other thing I wanted to ask you in regards to streaming issues, considering we had 2 mega fights 2 nights in a row, considering that Jon Jones just fought, we never got a chance to start. Did you have any issues with your ESPN Plus feed for UFC 309 the next day?
No.
Nothing. Wow. I thought for sure, just given the stakes of the fight and how many thousands of people were trying to watch at the same time, that it would be an issue, but it wasn't.
I didn't have any issue for Barrios Ramos or the fight before that. It was only when Taylor Serrano happened.
Yeah, so I don't think I ever told you. So so my issues were most of the night, actually. And then finally, once Paul-Tyson started, everything started to fix itself. It was around round 7 of the Serrano fight where things started to improve, because I missed portions of Serrano Taylor myself. And finally, I think they must have done something to fix the feeders, something at least on my end, because once Tyson Paul happened, I had no issues. But guess what was even weirder? I would go back into the stream, and when you go back into the stream, you never continue from where you were. It always
brought you back to the beginning.
So I was going to get there, but every single time until that beginning sequence happened after the Serrano fight, I would have to go in and manually make sure that the stream was live instead of from where I was. It was super weird.
So Zan, I decided to do something because we only ever do this for the UFC number cards, but we did the great, good, fair, man, poor poll because I was just morbidly curious on how this would go. Zan, for the first time ever, poor won the poll, and it was a landslide. The 304's results did not compare to this one. 72% of voters ranked it poor. 21% of voters put fair. Man, this was terrible. And Zan, I'm going to be honest, if we're going to give grades, I'm going to put Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson as the worst card of this year. And I know Taylor Serrano too was actually excellent, other than the headbutting and all the post-fight stuff and the judging controversy. Same thing with Barrios Ramos with the scoring controversy. I can't do it. I can't justify those 2 fights to put this card. I wanted to give it an F, but that would be shaming those 2 fights. But given everything that happened in the Netflix, I can't go higher than D.
I'm going to be a little bit more generous and give it a C- just because Serrano Taylor was a good fight. And the reason why it's not a D for me is because if Taylor Serrano was a flop, I would have given it a D. That fight was good enough, in my opinion, to hold me over. But still, as an overall card, if I were to even remotely give a percentage, this was like a 30.
I think this topped 304 for worst card of the year.
This was brutal. It's so brutal that Netflix still has it up on their main feed for people to watch it.
I think this was, you could say what you want about about the 2 PFL pay-per-view cards. You can say what you want about, UFC 304. This this card was utter trash.
And just to give you a little bit of credit, it actually made those PFL cards that weren't good look really good at the same time because of all this. It's unbelievable.
Last week I said if people mock PFL, but look at one championship, and now here I could say, look at Tyson Paul. This was terrible.
I can guarantee you that Fury Usyk at the end of December and the next in the next Tank Davis fight one of these problems. That's for sure.
I hope not. All right, quickly, couple of news items. After his win, Jake Paul did his usual shtick. He's called out Conor McGregor. He called out Canelo. He wants to fight Francis Ngannou. Oh, good Lord. Could you imagine? And the thing is, I could totally see, considering Jake Paul fought at heavyweight against Tyson, I could so see PFL booking Paul versus Ngannou for a pay-per-view.
Even though I'm not a fan of the Jake Paul circus, if that fight gets booked and you have it on the record as we're recording, I will go. Oh, I will go to that fight to see the circus unfold. I will.
You would?
I would go 1,000%. Yep.
Oh
yeah.
My God.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I would go to that fight. Absolutely. Just because I know overall content wise it would view greatly, and it would be the most unique fight I will have ever attended in person. So yeah, 100%. But I just hope for the sake of everyone involved that that fight doesn't happen, because that might be the first slaughter in the history of boxing. So
yeah. Look, I don't know.
I think it's more realistic at this point to see Jake Paul fight Conor McGregor, given all the stuff that Conor McGregor is currently up to at the moment.
Except I don't know when Conor McGregor is ever going to fight again, and you know my feeling.
No, I know that.
I will see him. I will believe he fights again when I actually see him in a ring or a cage.
So, so you won't believe it once he's making his grand arrivals into the arena. You won't believe it then.
He could always slip on an ice cube backstage.
Oh, come on.
Oh, didn't that happen with one of the UFC cards that in the back of the early days? Where
it was I think it was the Pete Williams Kevin Randleman fight that got canceled because of that exact scenario. Yeah.
But there is an elephant. There is one more elephant in the room. The undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world supposedly wants to fight Jake Paul.
You got to give credit to Artur Beterbiev for being a good sport, because he knows that he would become one of the biggest stars in boxing overnight on a global scale if he were to do that. He knows, and he's playing his cards right. He knows what's going on.
Producer Pat, before we got on the air, was saying basically it's genius because, I mean, either Beterbiev gives Paul the beating that we have all desired to see, or Jake Paul is going to be a boxing world champion.
Which I don't know if I'm.
If you're imagine how the boxing purists would react to seeing that.
Oh, I think a lot of boxing purists would quit watching the sport if that.
How would your old buddy Rick Glazer feel about that?
Oh, he would. I think he would say some very regrettable public things that
I can't imagine how Teddy Atlas would feel about that.
Oh,
he would probably say, "This is why I'm with the UFC's coverage now."
Yeah, he probably would call out the UFC by name and praise them if that were to happen.
And given that, I mean, look, if that actually happens, yeah, maybe it brings a whole bunch of eyeballs onto boxing. I give Jake Paul that, but at the same time,
Tom, would you? I know you're ripping on it as a bad idea, but I'm genuinely curious if Beterbiev versus Jake Paul ever happens, and you were assigned to cover it, would you?
I would do it. No, I would do it. I would do it. Look. I'm not a fan of Jake Paul, but one, he brings some eyeballs onto the sport, and two, as a combat sports journalist, as a combat sports,
I'd have to do it too.
It is a duty, right? It is a duty.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, 100%.
That's my.
By the way, which by the way, I'm not a huge that I'm not a huge gambling person anymore. that's one where I could maybe come out of retirement just one time and confidently say that it better be a bet over Jake Paul would definitely win. So yeah, 100%.
For sure. All right. UFC, quickly, couple of headlines. The
Yep.
quarter one schedule is now out. January 11th will begin the 2025 year with a Apex
UFC Vegas
card.
101. Yep.
The next week they head out to Cali to their first ever event at the Intuit Dome, the new home of the LA Clippers.
That's going to be. I think that's going to be one of the most unique TV productions in UFC history. What do you think?
I'm curious to see. I mean, the Intuit Dome has all these technological innovations that the Clippers keep pushing. I want to see what the UFC does with that.
Yeah, that'll be a very interesting card, and that's one. Given that I've been to some pretty high-profile UFCs, that one, my friends, is going to be a very tough, very tough ticket to get. That's for sure.
Definitely.
That's gonna be a tough one.
I'm assuming because Saudi is now confirmed to be a fight night, that 311 is going to be Islam defending against Arman.
I would hope so.
I would
Although
hope-
Dana didn't seem too keen on it on Saturday night.
I know, I'm getting worried. But like we ran through the names at lightweight, and a lot of them are coming off of losses, except for like Dan Hooker and Renato Moicano.
Right, and according to some sources I know, Dan Hooker's got a pretty big unannounced fight coming up, so we'll see.
So if it's not Islam versus Arman, then we could already say 311 is potentially effed.
Or who knows, maybe Alex Pereira steps up on short
Why
notice.
would I be surprised if they did Pereira Ankalaev at 311 if that
It
happened?
saves UFC 311. Hey,
We thought he was going to save 310, but we'll talk about 310 in a second.
for sure. I mean, hey, to begin to have Alex Pereira begin the year in any capacity, I wouldn't be opposed to it. As long as he's ready to go.
Actually, and it's MLK Day weekend, so it's a holiday weekend for most Americans. So
That's true. That's a very good point.
UFC 312, as we mentioned before, February 8th or 9th internationally because it's taking place in Sydney. Super Bowl weekend UFC pay-per-view. I love it.
Yeah, and although I can't talk about it publicly, there's some pretty big unannounced title fights that should make that card very, very interesting. So that should be a good one.
Then we have a couple of more.
I'll tell you about those later. How does that sound?
Okay, secret information. So sorry, everybody else. We have a couple of Apex cards along the way, and then of course, quarter one has to get its Vegas pay-per-view. That'll take place March 8th.
What would be your prediction for the main event for March 8th, given it's Las Vegas and given that March is like a huge card after the Q1? What would you guess?
Hey, Jon Jones, you want to actually fight Tom Aspinall and unify the heavyweight title in Vegas?
So I'm gonna have to disagree. I think they do Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall International Fight Week. And you want to know what card I think? You want to know what main event I think they do for Vegas?
Hit me.
I think it's going to be Dricus du Plessis' next title defense if they can't get Africa done.
I could see that.
That's what I think.
But I am leaning on the hope that they get Africa done. But at the same time, Dana basically during the pre-fight press week said he has a desire to have Hamzat be a title fighter in America,
which would be gigantic.
It would be gigantic, but it would basically ruin the point of, it would basically be mission fail for UFC Africa officially at that point.
It would, and I think the only thing that would be holding them back from not going there is finding an arena that logistically works for them. That's probably that's probably why, because Dana, he hates outdoors and weather impacting fights. And
correct. That being said, I know we're talking about Q1, but the way that the Q1 schedule is, I've got a feeling Q2, either April or May, will be that Spain card that Ilya defends against Alex.
That would be my guess. And assuming that Bilal is ready, I'm assuming that the June card is going to be the UFC Chicago return. At least I would hope so.
If the UFC actually goes to Chicago, which by the
Oh.
way, where is it? I haven't used it in a while. Here
Well,
you go.
he actually did mention twice at the post-fight press conference that he is going to go. His exact words, so he better come. Otherwise, I might have something to say about it.
I know
So-
you will. I know you will. All right. Let's talk about 310. So we have a lot of changes now
Some
that's
pretty
going on
good
with the
ones,
end of the
though.
year.
I would say. These
I
are
tried to
some-
fit everything on this banner.
Yeah, I feel like these are some pretty workable solutions. So let's break it down. For those of you who don't know, Bilal Muhammad is out with the toe infection, so he's not going to be able to fight. So the UFC opted to not go with an interim UFC welterweight title fight and have Shavkat Rakhmonov face Ian Gary. For those of you who don't know, Ian Gary was scheduled to fight Colby Covington at UFC Tampa. Ian Gary is now moved to the co-main event to fight Shavkat. So the winner of this fight, it's essentially a welterweight title eliminator, Kamaru Usman on the outside looking in. The new main event now is Alexandre Pantoja fighting Kaya Sakura, which from a hardcore's perspective is a very, very good fight and a solid main event. But for those of you who are tuning in to see a mega December main event pay-per-view, this is simply not it. So
and I will admit, with all the madness of 310, that they were hoping, we Conor Chandler at long last, and that's not happening. And now Bilal's not happening, and Nick Diaz is not. But you know what? There are still good fights here.
No, it's
Pantoja
good.
versus Asakura is cool. And Zain, I actually checked early thing for Fight Study. Ryzen has uploaded a pair of Kaya Sakura
All
fights.
right,
So we'll actually get to watch Ryzen fights.
let's
Fight
go. Let's go.
Study.
Or as Dina likes to say, the risen, the
Risen.
the risen champion.
He is he is risen. But Kaya Sakura, yeah, I mean, that's definitely still a fun fight. Aljamain Sterling is a fun fight, but can I ask,
The bout order on this card is crazy.
why is Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie on the main card?
I have no idea. And you put it over the Aljamain Sterling fight. It's just unfathomable to me. It's so stupid.
Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie has the potential to be one of the worst, if not the worst, UFC fight this year.
Yeah, and no disrespect, but Clay Guida versus Chase Cooper is way too far down the card, in my opinion.
This is
way too far down on the card.
I questioned the fight order heading into 309 for the prelims. 310, I still question. I might have more questions.
Yeah, I mean, well, if it's based on social media followers, it's I don't think it's really working all that well.
No, it's not good. The fights themselves are good. Don't
Are
get me
good.
wrong. You need to see 310. I don't think it's going to be that bad. Is it disappointing considering what could have been in multiple ways? Yes. But I think, especially if you're a hardcore MMA fan, you still got plenty of awesome talent, plenty of awesome fights.
Yeah,
here.
well, Tom, I think the difficult part, and this is something that I noticed because of my college football brain, it's going to be going up directly against the Big Ten championship game on CBS.
I know.
So
and of course,
the UFC is going to have some coverage troubles by the time the fourth quarter of that game starts. Because by the time
of course, unfortunately, the pay-per-view is not going to sell well because flyweights. Because of course,
right, unfortunately. Although at least the good news for Pantoja is it's to say that 2 years in a row he was on the end of your Las Vegas pay-per-view.
And one of them he main evented. Actually, he main evented 2 pay-per-views this year. He main evented 301 as well.
You know, I'm
saying like this is phenomenal for Pantoja this past 12 months.
Yeah, which means if he has a tremendous performance, maybe the UFC will start thinking about investing in their flyweight division a little bit more.
Hashtag
hey,
save the flyweights.
we can only dream, right?
Hashtag save the flyweights.
That's true.
Meanwhile, in the most cruel irony, Ian Gary is going to be replaced by Colby Covington for Tampa.
It's so cruel. I know there's not really press conferences for fight night cards, but this is what there might actually need to be one because
I mean, look,
because the build up to this would be crazy.
and credit where it's due. Colby has been another one of these title shot or bust guys, but he's lost 3 title fights now, and he has been on the sideline for a year. He hasn't fought since that dreadful showing against Leon. So he needs another fight, and feeding him to a guy, potentially feeding, I should say, having a test for Buckley with a top 5 former interim champion like Covington is perfect for a Tampa main event, especially given Covington, the association between Covington and Florida. Obviously, not longer with American Top Team, but him training, fighting out of Florida. It just makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and speaking of, because you had said UFC 296, and what's hilarious about it, Tom, is it's almost a year to the day of his last fight, which is pretty wild.
Yeah. But I mean, also to throw it in, it also is perfect timing considering, I hate bringing politics up, but who just won the U.S. presidential election?
Oh, I know, and it's in Florida too. Yeah, I mean, and this was almost a no-brainer. So if you aren't a Colby Covington fan, this mix probably just made you more of a non-Colby Covington fan, given his placement on the Tampa card. And I actually think, just to throw it to the people a little bit, given all of the natural disasters that have happened in Florida, the least the UFC could do is give the essential people that tried to clean up the communities the best they possibly could. The least they could do is give them free tickets, right?
I would hope so. They're definitely going to get a video tribute, but I hope they do more than that.
That would be cool. Which, by the way, I think UFC Tampa, assuming the fight night card stays together, that's actually a really good fight night card to close the year. So hopefully it's
and if I'm not mistaken, that's going to be the annual Jimmy V card too, right?
That's correct. Yep.
So that's a good way to end the year. But before we get to Tampa, before we get to 310, we do have this weekend UFC Macau.
You're going to be up for. You're going to be up the entire card. My friend, we got a 6 a.m. Eastern main card start. We got a 3 a.m. Eastern prelim start.
Man, I'm going. I'm going into work on Friday, so I'm going to be up from like 5 a.m. Friday and staying up most, if not all, of the hours until 9 a.m. Eastern on Saturday.
It's pretty unbelievable. Which, as I told you off the air, text me when the main event starts because your boy over here will probably end up being asleep. So,
I know. All right, but the main event itself is fantastic. It's Jan versus Figueiredo, and
great fight.
We talked about, Zain, how Figgy.
It's a travesty that it's not going to be viewed by more people because this is a great fight.
I know, and the thing is, Figgy, we talked about weeks ago, Zain, how great he was at flyweight, but now just how he's taken that success and is translating it over to bantamweight, and now the best thing to do for him. Give him a former champion like Peter Yan. And if Figgy wins this fight, Zain, I mean, maybe he's next in line. Maybe Figgy, if with a win here, gets the winner of what I'm assuming it's going to be Murad Dvalishvili versus Umar Nurmagomedov.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great fight. I mean, you got 2 former champions here, 2 guys that are almost mirror images of each other. And the way that Figueiredo has looked as of late leads me to believe that he's going to put on a masterclass performance. Peter Yan is obviously somebody that's been around a long time, has a lot of very unique skills.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be a human chess match, and the guy that's going to make the first mistake is going to lose. And I feel like this is one of those fights, Tom, where you could easily flip a coin and you don't know who's going to win. I'm going to say based on activity though, that I think that Figueiredo edges out a 5-round decision. What do you think?
You read my mind. I agree with you. I'm going to go based on activity as well. I'm going to go with Figueiredo. I'm going to say it's a decision. I don't think he's going to finish Jan. I think it's going to be a really tough fight, but I think Figueiredo is going to be able to match Jan on the feet. Even if Jan lands the stronger strikes, I think Figgy's volume is going to be there, and I think Figgy will be able to handle Jan's wrestling.
Yeah, and I just want to say, if there's anybody in China listening to this and you are going to this fight, congratulations, because you are in for a treat. Because you were in for a treat with this main event. I can guarantee you, if this fight was in America, this fight could definitely sell some tickets for sure. So
definitely.
Yeah.
All right. That's going to finally do it for this edition of the MMA Outsiders. So make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Enter the Bench Network here on YouTube. YouTube.com/ETV Network. Help us get to 900 and 1,000 subscribers. Shout out to everybody listening on the audio end, wherever you get your podcast. And of course, make sure to go to playback.tv/ETV Network for the latest stream information for the playback streams, especially for the stuff we do with the NBA. Shout out to Playback for their sponsorship of this show and the network as a whole. So with that, for Zain, I'm Tom. For Pat, I should say for Zain, for Pat, shout out to him again for making an appearance here on the show. It's very rare we get the 3 triangle.
It's true, and it's very rare that we get the 3 triangle for part of the show instead of the entire show, because usually whenever he comes on, it's usually the whole time. But
Yeah,
very, very unique experience. And this was a good show. I had a blast. I think we're both pretty tired. Enjoy the fights this week. If you are waking up early, pancakes and fights, if you will.
Yep.
If you aren't, do your best to avoid spoilers. But in any event, we just wanted to remind you to be Joe Piper.
Be Joe Piper. Oh, actually, hold on. Next week, PFL World Championships preview. We're basically at the tail end. We've got 3 big cards left to preview. The PFL World Championships 310 and UFC Tampa. So we're here. We're at the end of the year.
And we have we are planning time.
And Fury Usyk,
yes.
which we're planning for.
Yes. So technically 4, but 3 major MMA events. Yep.
Yeah, so the ETV Network calendar is going to end on the 14th, but we will have stuff for Fury Usyk. Stay tuned for more information about that.
100%.
All right. We'll see you next week, everyone. Take care.
Have a good one.